At the lower levels, yeah, you'll like astonishment with oneself, disquietude with oneself, feelings of shame and guilt, feelings of inferiority toward oneself. That's a big one. Like the way I'm behaving is less than who I ought to be. If you experience that feeling, that's good. To feel dissatisfied, positive maladjustment, my favorite quote by Debt. To be maladjusted to low-level society is a positive feature. And I just look at with how society is structured right now, if you're not experiencing anxiety and depression, like I'm worried about you. Seriously, like, so, I don't know, is anybody like teaching this concept that like maybe it's like useful? It's not necessarily an enemy that you have to like, oh, don't say it, it triggers me, like, oh, like don't make me feel anxiety. It's like, oh, I don't want to hurt you, but like, maybe like anxiety is really good, you know? Don't run away, it's your friend. So, yeah, sorry, okay, I saw hands.
So is there some people that don't have the capability to ever move past stage
Yes.
one? Like they're just born that way, they'll stay in stage one the whole life?
Yeah, so I don't know if you saw like people without enough developmental potential like are incapable.
Like they don't have those things that,
Well, how do they?
But if you have high developmental potential, you will undergo. Like you don't have to know about positive disintegration to experience it, right? Like you will, like it's a human phenomenon.
and also another question has, can you reach stage 5 and not be a good person?
No. Stage 5 is built off of aligning yourself with a universal hierarchy of human values.
So you can't make up your own values to reach stage 5?
No, that's psychopathy, yeah. Yeah. You become a law unto oneself, yeah.
I mean, so, but you can have people that have like psychoneurotic and psychopathic traits, right? Both of those things are the spectrum.
Yeah, like I said, it's a polarity, right?
Yeah.
And it's based on,
Is that where the dynamicism comes in? Sorry.
yeah, yeah, it's kind of based on that,
Yeah.
but not really. So like, we all will experience disintegration. It's kind of like it showed like the group of people, like how it's like you disintegrate in level 2, and then level 3 is like once you get to like level 3, it's like taking the red pill or blue pill, right? Like you can't go back once you. Level 2 is like someone loses their job, right? And all of a sudden it's like, oh, I don't know who I am, and they like mope around the house like with a beard and like messy hair, and they're just like, oh, I have no identity, and right? They're experiencing disintegration, or like you have a spouse that dies, or the loss of a loved one, something very close to your identity is taken from you. That's when you experience disintegration, and basically the idea here is like, if you don't have enough developmental potential, you will like look for another job. Doesn't matter if you hated it. It's like I need to get out of this as soon as possible. So like, yeah, like you will generally reintegrate back at level 1 pretty quick. But if you have more developmental potential, maybe this crisis will make you start asking questions like, I even like that job. Like I've always wanted to do this without requiring me to like go back to school and like, but I feel like I have to, right? It requires a phenomenal amount of energy to shift to level 3, and without that, you just won't. So it's yes, like it's basically engaging these developmental dynamisms that we see in like our cognitive structures that psychopaths just don't have. So it's not like yeah, like learning to satisfy your basic primitive biological instincts. Like that's technically psychopathic. Like Dabrowski says, oh here, like there's a good quote. Let's see. If you just go into the Wikipedia article, psycho. Okay, all right. Dabrowski distinguished the two subgroups of level 1 by degree. The state of primary integration is a state contrary to mental health, right? Which is that quote of like, to be maladjusted to low-level society is a positive feature. But if like, it doesn't bother you and you learn to work within the systems of society to achieve your primitive, achieve wealth and status and stuff, then, by the world standards, you are mentally healthy. If you are very bothered by this, you're on the path to mental health, despite what people are telling you. So, like, don't listen. That's what they will tell you. Yeah.
Would you say that like jumping from level to level is usually like externally triggered, and then depending on the person's potential, or do people just like wake up and say I'm gonna change everything?
I'll go through this in a minute. So like, yeah, like, okay, the state of primary integration is a state contrary to mental health. A fairly high degree of primary integration is present in the average person. A very high degree of primary integration is present in the psychopath. So basically, it's like your average person is like, in the psychopathic mindset of if all you can think of is, food, sex, shelter, whatever status, then that's oriented. That doesn't mean you're gonna go kill people. Not all psychopaths kill people, but just this idea is very radical of like, no, that's not what mental health is. Mental health is to be autonomous, to be a free agent, and to be authentic, to have empathy, and really empathy gets in the way if you're trying to achieve wealth, status, and power. So, a lot of psychopaths or people with cluster B personality disorders, they will look at someone who is very empathic as like a sign of their inferiority. Like, oh, I don't let those silly feelings get in my way. Like, I'm like superior. I'm not weak. Right? So, yeah. So, okay. Like primary integration is what we're all born into, and we kind of experience this disintegration. But you notice that a lot of things are still black and white thinking. That's how primary integration thinks. That's kind of the key trait. Is like look at religion and like, am I going to heaven or am I going to hell? It's like one or the other. Am I a good person or a bad person? Right? Are you a Democrat or Republican? Like it's just really like kind of just this like two binary. What? Yeah.
So this first level, is it more people are just like more people are naturally at this level, or is it because of the environment that would cause them to be level 1? Is it most people are at this level?
So I have internal environment, and what we're getting to is the external environment.
Because there's both factors, of course, that influence it. But
Yes. So have you seen Good Will Hunting? Matt Damon.
Yeah.
Okay. Internal environment. He actually he could have like a very high developmental potential internal environment. external environment was not conducive to autonomous and authentic personality development. So I'll get into that a little bit more, but yes, like, you need both, right? You can be, born in the most conducive external environment, but, if you just don't have these things, the minimum requirements, you probably won't experience disintegration. So yeah, so that whole concept of, during this phase, existential despair is the predominant emotion. What if, like, oh, I lost my job, oh, like, I got divorced, oh, like, my wife passed away, or whatever. The resolution of this phase begins as individually chosen values begin to replace social mores. It's not mores, by the way, I learned that the hard way. I was like, social mores, I'm like, you mean mores? And it was at an academic conference too, in front of my peers. That have been ingrained by rote and are integrated into a new hierarchy of personal values. These new values often conflict with the person's previous social values. Many of the status quo explanation for the way things are learned through education and from the social order collapse under conscious individual scrutiny. So, I feel like a lot of the things, when it comes to faith crisis, identity crisis, it's usually you're kind of experiencing this, right? Of like, you were told one thing, and then if you're being honest and aware of like, this doesn't seem to add up. This is conflicting. And so, yeah, like once that collapses, once the way things are collapses. Have you guys seen Inside Out, the Pixar film?
Yes.
Literally positive disintegration right there. She had the islands of personality, right? And then as she moves to a new place, has a new school, like experiences a new environment, she experiences new conflicts, and her old islands of personality no longer are relevant or congruent with her new developmental phase of life. So they break down, and then she discovers the dynamism of joy and sadness, and she actually allows sadness to do its deal, right? The anxiety and depression. She allows herself to be depressed. She uses it to build new, more complex islands, right? And some of the old things pass away. That's literally what we're talking about.
Is that also connected to Freud's theology as well?
Psychoanalytic theory, yes. So, okay, so level disintegration, that's what I was saying, level 3